Welcome back to Insights at DDLynn Designs, a unique twist in the ancient art of wire. This is DDLynn, and I'm excited today to show you how to make these components. I'm using 8 inches of 18 gauge round wire, and because my wrist size is a 6, I made 6 of these components, and they've been referred to as a mosaic, filigree, flower type design. I've also heard someone say, little girl, it looks like tic-tac-toe. I thought that was really cute. So what I also did, and I'm also going to be giving you all sorts of techniques and tips to accelerate your journey in this ancient art. They're key, truly key, these techniques, to learn and really move along in this wonderful magical art. So I'm going to be giving you some ideas of how I did this. So my wrist size is a 6, so I made 6 components. And by adding the jump rings, and I'd use double jump rings, twisted 20 gauge square wire, and then the jump rings and the clasp fits my wrist perfectly with just enough dangle to gently roll off my wrist with gap space. Some people like really big bracelets. I don't like them hanging a lot. And then my little signature that I like to do on a lot of pieces is a little gemstone dangle. And then I used, as I mentioned, double jump rings. And here's a tip about twisting your wire and making them into jump rings. Not only does it harden your wire, so it makes them really strong jump rings versus just using a 20 gauge round, but after you tumble, you barely can see the seam where the jump rings are coming together. And I used an 8mm tanzanite gemstone. So let's get started. So before we do, don't forget to hit the bell if you're already a subscriber. And if you're not, I really appreciate if you'd subscribe to my channel. And a thumbs up takes 1 second. So your feedback and comments are really, really appreciated. So anyways, we're going to take our 8-inch piece of wire and we're going to be using strictly 3 pliers. Well, actually 2. My nippers to cut our wire. And then I'm using a Xeron flat-nosed plier, and I'm not going to be using needle nose today, and here's another tip. The reason is when we're making components and we have to close off a little tiny end right here. You have a lot more control over your wire when you have a stronger, wider girth and a thicker, heavy-duty plier, because the needle nose is going to slip off that wire and this isn't, and you use less pressure. So that's a really, really good tip. So I'm going to take my 8 inches of wire. I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail, and this is a 6-step bell-making plier for people that are new to the magical world of wire art. And I'm going to put my first step in, which is facing up, and I'm simply going to push that wire around and I'm coming over the top. Then I'm going to adjust my grip and I'm going to come back in and I'm going to straighten that wire up. So you should have something like this. And I'm going to square it up by simply squeezing inside, and it just bent that wire up just a little bit, so it's perfectly squared. Now I'm going to leave myself about a 2 to 3 millimeter gap, and I'm going to be using my 4th step. And I'm going to face that step away from me so that it's on top of the wire. I'm trying to get adjusted here so I can move back. And I'm going to line my wire up, and I'm simply going to swing that wire around. Then I'm going to adjust my wrist. And as I'm swinging it, I'm looking at my gap space. And I want some gap space, but not too much. And that looks good there to me, because I'm going to be slipping a wire in there when I connect off. So I'm just going to gently roll little steps. And you should have something like this. Now I'm going to square my wire up again. I'm going to put my plier back in. And if you watch closely, you should see this wire here tilt up a little bit. I'm just going to do a gentle squeeze. And did you see that push up? So that put everything in line. Everything's squared up. I like to flatten and make sure everything's nice as I'm going along. Now I'm going to make my little loop again. And I'm going to put my first step in with a little gap space. And this is, I think, the easiest way to learn how to do this versus just making the entire loop with your plier. And I'm adjusting my wrist And then I'm rolling that wire and bringing it around. Remember, I want a little gap space. So you should have something like this. So I'm going to square that up just by flattening it. And we're just going to keep moving our way around. So again, my fourth step is facing away from me with about a 3 to 4 millimeter gap. And I'm just going to push, make sure your wires are squared and lined up, and not, what I mean is not bent down like this, or your loop is going to be cocky. Then I'm just going to push that wire around, and I'm riding on top of the wire. I'm not coming underneath it. I'm going to adjust my wrist, and I'm going to swing it around. Then I'm going to start rocking it closer to this smaller loop until I get the gap space that I want, and then I'm going to straighten that wire out. And then I'm going to square it up. And as I square it up, it actually pushes it a little bit closer to this smaller loop. So here's what you should have. So if this was your top, for example, then we're coming down the side and we're going to be making a square. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to rock this a little bit closer. You want about a 1.5 millimeter space, or millimeter, yeah. There we go, that's a little bit better. So I'm going to get my first step again, come in and give myself some gap space. And again, I'm going to be riding over the top of this wire. So I'm going to swing it around, and I'm adjusting my wrist and swing it around. Now I want to get closer. So now my wire is coming straight down with the other wire. And I'm just going to line it up. So let's turn it around and see what we got going on here. So I need to roll this up a little bit. Want to get as square as we can. Imagine this as a square. So we've got this side, and now we've got this side. So now this wire and this tail wire that we started with should be going straight parallel to each other. So now I'm going to make my center loop again. And this time the fourth step is facing towards me. And I'm simply just going to grab that wire and swing it around. And then I'm going to start rocking it in position to where I want it to sit. I'm going to adjust my wrist, take that out of there for a second, and square it up. And then flatten everything up and make sure this is squared up. So I'm going to put my pliers back in here, and I'm just simply going to press on that wire a little bit. Just making little adjustments. This looks relatively easy, but I have to tell you, the first time I ever tried this, which was several years ago, it was not easy, at least not for me. If it was for you, love your feedback. There we go. Just making sure it's squaring up. So now we're going to make our little loop again. We're going to be cutting this off. But I'm leaving the tail because when I cut it off, and I'll explain it to you more better, I don't want to shrink this loop down too much. It don't make sense when we get there. So now I'm going to put my first step facing away from me with some gap space. And I'm going to swing that wire around. And I want the wire now to go straight across, because remember, we're making a square. So I'm going to swing it around, and I'm going to start rocking it to where I want it to be, and then swing it even more. And then I'm going to square it up. So do you see how we've made a square? So now I'm going to make my third loop. And I'm going to open this little one down here with the tail up because I noticed it's a little bit smaller. So I'm going to rock that up a little bit so I can get some working room, because I'm going to be cutting that. And when you cut it, your wires tend to spring back. So I want to make sure that I have enough wire when I cut it to compensate for it springing back, or it's going to shrink that loop down. So let's do that a little bit more. And I want a different shape on it. I want more of that teardrop. And these are all little tips. So I'm just kind of squeezing it in a little bit so I get more of that teardrop shape. Doesn't have to be, by the way. I want it rocked away. The reason why we want that gap space is this wire is going to be connecting into here. And you'll see in a moment. So now I'm going to go ahead and trim that. And I'm going to come from this side. I'm turning it around. This is going to be our back. And I'm just going to snip it. And if it's too long, then I can tuck it in. Okay, that looks good to me. Then I'm going to get my bell making pliers and I'm going to get my fourth step facing towards me. And I'm going to open this up a little bit so I have some working room. And I'm going to swing this wire around. And now you're going to see how quickly we can use 8 inches of wire. And if it's harder for you, then cut longer length. And then I'm just going to swing this wire up. It's a very short piece of wire. Okay, I need to make this a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to square this up. It's not squared up. There we go. I'm going to straighten this wire out a little bit right here because we're going to be tucking it over here. I was just a little shy on my wire there. So it's going to be a little short. So maybe 8.5 inches, you guys. I don't know. I thought I did this several times today with 8 inches of wire. So to make my life easier, I'm going to show you another tip. Where's the one I just did? Oh, here it is. I'm going to lift up on this wire and I'm going to pre-bend it so that I can lock it in. I'm going to get my needle nose that I wasn't going to be using at all, but because I really made this too short. Just straightening everything up. So I'm going to move this out of the way so that I can bend this tip. Do you see how I bent that? You should have more wire, more excess wire, but hey, we move along and make changes as we go. So the wire is now coming in between. And this is the one that I trimmed. Now you know why I wanted that little excess in there. So it's coming in between, and I'm going to grab that wire and pull it up. Be careful not to misalign your shape. So I've got that little tiny tip in there. And this is where these wonderful pliers really come in handy. And I'm holding it rather firmly so that I can pull it forward a little bit. And then I'm going to scrunch it down. So here is what we have, our beautiful little mosaic, if you want to call that, or filigree design. And this is what is on here. Same thing. Now, if you want to make a smaller piece, you have to remember what size your bead is going to be. Okay, so on this I used 18 gauge. I could probably put a 10 millimeter bead in this one. So now I'm going to hammer it. So let's get this all out of the way. And if you've never hammered before, I'm going to be using a flat facing hammer. And I'm going to be turning it over on the back because I want the hammer marks on the back. And I'm just going to hold this down and I'm just going to gently hammer the arc of the loop away from me. And I'm just turning my piece very gently. It's loud, you guys. And I'm not hammering hard, but I'm swirling, I'm moving the hammer away from me. So here's what we have, and you see the difference already? So we're going to do this all the way around. I'm going to hold this firmly. Watch you don't hit your thumb. If you notice me spinning it a little bit with my thumb, so I get equal amount of pressure all the way around that wire. That looks pretty good. Now we're going to do this side. And because my wire was a little short, I'm kind of hammering that little tail wire that I tucked in down into the wire. And I'm going away from me, which is in the direction of the loop, that little tiny loop of wire, that end wire that's wrapping over the design. And that will bring it down some. There we go. Much, much better. So let me show you. It really pushed that wire down and real flush into the back side. So we'll finish this off. And one more. Now you could do the little loops too, but I'm going to leave mine rounded because I like the variation. I think it just creates a really cool look with the round and the squared off. So here's what we have. So what I'm going to do now, here's another tip if you're new to my channel. I like my wire really clean. I use 180 grit professional buffing blocks. I don't use the fingernail ones. These are by Wedeer or Wideer. It says 180 abrasive. Do you see that? And the reason why I don't use the fingernail ones is I learned the hard way. They don't last. These last, and I buy them by like a box of 10 or something. And I've been into crafts and Native American traditional industry art and stained glass and feather ties and all sorts of things. I've made flutes. So I like everything really clean, front and back. So I'm just giving her a good polish, getting any possible nicks out. And then here's another tip. I'm going to bevel down these edges. So I'm coming on a 45-degree angle. And this is where I hammered, and it just smooths everything else really nice. I don't need to do it on the round, just the hammered edges. Isn't that cool, you guys? So you can attach a bead. Let me grab a bead really quick. I'm going to be using probably a 10 millimeter on this. Let me see what I've got. I don't think I have a 10 millimeter, and I think this one's going to be too small. Let's see. Now this is apatite. Actually, that will fit beautiful, and that's a gorgeous bead. I'm moving around, you guys. So this is an apatite gemstone, and I would attach all your beads first before you attach your jump rings. So I'm going to get a 26 gauge weaving wire. Here's another tip. You want to make sure that your hole is big enough to compensate for your wire. If it's not, so you always want to test your hole first. I'm going to cut myself 8 inches of weaving wire. Let's get all this nonsense out of the way. And then I'm going to thread this through. Ooh! Flopsy flopsy. These are such pretty beads. Is that 26 or 20? Oh, I knew I grabbed the wrong wire. It felt funny. It was like, that doesn't feel right. Here's my 26. I wasn't feeling that heaviness to it that I'm used to. I can almost pick up a piece of wire now and feel it. Like, what is that? So we're gonna grab our little bead if he doesn't float away from me. and I'm going to find center. And you can add your beads any way you want. You can use half round, and I'm going to slip this through. And you want to make sure, here's another tip, that you do not tie off. Let me show you what I mean. Do not tie your wire off where you connected it, okay? You want to tie it off on a wire that's completely, I can't even think of the word. You want to make sure it's on a loop that hasn't been cut or connected. All I'm doing is just feeding my wire through, centering up. And then I'm going to wrap it around and through. And I'm going to cross over in the back. I'm going to do 3 loops. You can do as many as you like. You can actually weave beads all through every single one of these spirals, or the, God, you guys, I just can't think of the right words today, but you know what I mean, right? I kind of wrote over my wire there. So I've got 3 here. And now I'm going to tie off. I could have had a little bit of a bigger bead, so I'm going to show you a little trick I do to compensate for that. Because see how I've got a lot of room in here? I'm thinking I really need to use a different bead, you guys. I don't like all that space unless I can get a 2mm copper bead in there. So let's try that. This is what I mean. We make changes as we go. This may be a little too big. We're going to find out. Trial and error. So let's stick the bead back on. I do everything freestyle, so for me, it's just like adding and taking away as I'm going. Will that work? Just a little bit too much. Now I could open up this square just a wee bit to compensate for those 2mm beads I used in there. And all I'm going to do is put my pliers in here, and I'm just going to push in the middle. I'm just opening up my pliers a little bit, just giving myself a little bit more room to see if that helped. I'm going to need a little bit more. So I'm going to go in the opposite direction. These are tips, tricks, and techniques. Just opening it up, and it's not compromising or changing the design. I need a little bit more. And this is probably going to give me about 1 millimeter, these little tiny movements I'm doing. And I'm always so delighted when these things happen. And I'm looking at that, I'm going to need a little bit more. So I'm going to come from underneath. Oops, wrong pliers. My handles are coming off my pliers as usual. Stretch that out. Stretch that out. Could you see the wire stretching a little bit? And I'm going to let that ride over the wire a little bit. That's kind of pretty. I like that. Let that bead right on top of that wire a little bit. So I am going to make 3 wraps. Now for beginners, watch your loops when you're pulling it through. Always keep a full loop so that you don't tangle or knot up your wire or pinch off your wire. I'm going to slide this down. There we go. Just want to keep that bead back. So the way I'm going to need to do that is pushing it through. Now I'm going to keep my fingernail there so it doesn't hump over again. And I'm just going to feed my wire through. And this is where I'm going to need to make sure I tighten it up. Oops, lost that bead again. So now I'm going to pull it in and really make sure I've got a good, firm pull on this wire. Yep. Just straighten that wire up a little bit. So I just wanted to show you guys how I wrap the bead in. So I'm going to slide it up. Oh, that's going to be pretty once we do the other side. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my wire through again, and I'm going to cross over the back. I'm going to bring this wire through because I'm going to wrap the other side. So what I'm doing, you want to keep a good loop, is I'm pulling that wire through. Now watch that it doesn't want to ride up. I'm holding it down with my thumb, the wire coming through. Well, I thought I was. Did I go the opposite direction on this one? I say everything out loud. Oh, I did. I wanted to go over, you guys. Sorry. So let's come through again. How many wraps do I have here? I need 3. I don't know how I got that so confused, but it happens. So I'm going to cross over, but I'm going to come under now. Getting myself all flustered. Okay. So I've got 3 full rotations. Tighten those up. Now I'm going to cross over the front and bring my wire through. And I'm just crossing over the front of that wrap. I want to center it up. I'm really going to pull it through. Do you see how that snugged down in there? I really pulled that wire through. So I have, how many rotations do I have here? 3. So I'm going to come up again. And I'm going to line this up. And I'm going to cinch that wire down in there against it. So I'm crossing over the front of it. I'm going to slide this down. Feeding it through. And I'm going to cinch it over that bead. And I'm giving it a good little tug in the back so it really tucks in there. Now I'm going to come through and make a few more wraps. You want to make sure that that doesn't open up that loop down there. You want that cinched in there really good. And you can do it any way you want. I change it up all the time. I noticed my little loop up here got a little cockeyed. Okay. Now let's do this side. Where am I coming out from? So I want to cross over. When I'm nice and snug. Now you could take off from here and make more decorative design. I'm just squaring this up a little bit. And this would be the starting of your bracelet link or your pendant. I did a mother-daughter design like this, and the little girl was too young to really have a bracelet. She would have definitely probably broke it or caught it on things. So I'm very mindful when I get custom orders for clients that have daughters. I always say, you know, it's better for them not to have bracelets, maybe a necklace, because they're going to probably get it caught on something. So I'm just fiddling around. Now I want to show you what you could do from here. Now you could come up if you had enough wire and you could start wrapping your loops. You could literally wrap all around. I mean, the sky's the limit. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to cut my wire. And I'm going to do that by snapping it. And I'm just going to do a wiggle jiggle and it comes right off. Tips, tricks, and techniques. They accelerate your journey in this very ancient art. And the same thing here. Just a wiggle jiggle, and I'm holding my thumb very firmly where I want the wire to snap. So there is our lovely little mosaic, or whatever you want to call it. This one I want to make an adjustment on. There we go. Isn't that beautiful? So it could be earrings, you could make an ear hook, put an ear hook on it, add some more beads, whatever you want to do. The sky's the limit. I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. I really appreciate your feedback. So, tell me what you'd like to see, and I'd be happy to do it if I can. I wish for all of you all that you wish for yourselves. May you have a wonderful, fabulous, magical wire wrap day. Bye for now.